the 776 Field Artillery came from Camp Maxey, Texas, near Paris, Texas. And they originally were OU students made privates when they were freshmen in the ROTC. So they knew when they graduated, they would go to Fort Sill to officers training, and they were artillery trained. Murry was asked to teach. They had so many students, and he had surveyed land during the summer in Garvin and McLean County, and he was real good in math. And so the two professors asked him if he would teach and kind of relieve them of a few duties. And so towards the end of his fourth year, he taught field artillery for the ROTC. Well, then his class went to Fort Sill, and they trained there for a few weeks, and then he had a choice of Camp Maxey in Texas or a place up in Washington State or Oregon, and he chose to be close home, and so he chose Texas. And he was second lieutenant by then, and one time he had to go back to Fort Sill for training, and this young man that was flying just a real small observation plane said, "I need to get some hours. Could I fly you to Lawton?" And Murry said, "Okay." And they took off on a pretty warm day, and they were flying, and Murry said he nodded off, and then he woke up and he looked around, and the pilot was asleep.
Oh, no.
And he yelled at him and woke him up, and the guy just laughed. He thought it was funny.
I've never heard that before. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so Murry didn't sleep anymore.
Yeah, really. Not playing.
Anyway, I even went to Lawton once and stayed while he took training. He rented an apartment for me, and I stayed there, and I was sewing some clothes, or I even made curtains for the enlisted men's headquarters. And I had found this red tape that had rifles crossed, and so it was appropriate for artillery. And so he got all his training, and then he led Charlie's battery of 100 men, and there was a captain over him, but the colonel told Captain Wiedebush to leave Murry alone, that his men liked him and would do whatever he said. So Wiedebush he hung out more with headquarters. Well, anyway, in the fall of 1944, they were shipped off to England, and they landed and rode a train across, and then they waited, and they landed on Omaha Beach about a couple of months after
D-Day.
the D-Day. And they were to go with Patton. So they struck out with Patton, and of course he went ahead and would get too far ahead of his supply group, and he got in trouble with the American generals. And so anyway, I'm just getting you a kind of
Well, the background's very interesting.
background. And Patton got word that Bastogne was surrounded and he was to come back. And they were in the Ardennes forest, and they were going up a mountain, and these howitzers that the artillery shot were, I think they were 150 millimeters, and they were on half tracks, pulled by trucks. Well, this one driver froze. He was scared to death. Because there was no side, it was a big cliff drop off. And Murray had to have him lifted out, put another driver in, ask the men to come and stand on the cliff side and push on the trailer to keep it from slipping off on the side of the mountain. And he came back with a fear of mountains after that.
I'm sure.
Real fear. Just see a mountain, and he couldn't drive. I had to take over.
Yeah.
And so, but Patton made it back to Bastogne, and Murray had told all his men to put on as many pair of socks as they could get on with their boots, and to wear 2 pairs of pants, and as many shirts and jacket as they could to keep from getting frostbitten. Or because he came upon a church before they got to Bastogne, and it was full of young men, Americans, that were waiting to be transported to England, and they were going to have their feet amputated.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And he saw some terrible things, and that was why he was trying to tell his men to take care of your feet, especially in your hands. And so one of his Battery B one night lost 50 men to the Germans' artillery. And Murray always told his Charlie battery, when it's your turn, shoot the howitzer, but we all have to move and dig a shallow foxhole. And so his group lived. He brought back all 100.
Oh, wow.
But that the B battery lost 50 in one night from being careless. And so Murray was observing where the light was coming from, and he went through the woods, and since he knew surveying, he estimated where this German battery was.
He went by himself, didn't he?
Yeah, by himself
Yeah.
through the woods, and came back, and they took that German battery out, and he got the Bronze Star for that.
Wow.
It's amazing.
Most men would have just sent somebody else to go do it. It sounds like he
Yeah.
took the initiative to do it himself, and that's what.
If it's going to be done,
Yeah.
he'd do it.
Yeah.
That's a good leader. That's what a good leader does. You know?
Yeah. He was a great leader.
He could depend on his, because he had surveyed land and measured it. He could estimate exactly where this German battery was, and
Yeah.
they wiped him out.
Wow. That's amazing.
And then Patton called for a tank that was entering a Belgian town, and he called for artillery to take it out. Well, they were a mile away, and Murray walked up to his, some of his men were trying to get the howitzer unstuck. The trailer had gotten stuck in the mud and snow, and so he walked up and saw two officers berating his men, get those howitzers out, and he just put his hands on his guns. He didn't draw them, but they left.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah.
And he took care of getting the howitzers out, called for big trucks to come and pull them out, pull these trailers out with the cannons, and set it up. And the first shot that Murray's men, Charlie battery shot, took that tank out a mile away.
Wow.
Wow.
In that German town.
Wow.
He was accurate.
That's unheard of on the first shot at a mile
It
away.
is.
That's because usually you're having to take shots to
Take
get your
shots
range.
to get
yeah.
closer and
Mhm.
closer.
You have to range.
Wow, that's it. That
But-
is really cool.
He was really good at his job.
Yeah, for sure. And he was how old at this time?
Well, we were married, he was 23 in
Okay.
42,
Okay.
so this was 44.
So 25 years old.
Yeah,
He was just a kid.
well, that's what these older recruits thought in his battery. They thought, well, he's wet behind the ears, but they found out different.
Yeah.
They ended up liking him really well because he would do extra things, like back in Texas when they were getting ready for overseas. After maneuvers, he had a truck already coming with cold watermelon.
Oh wow. Yeah.
That's great.
And the men liked all these little, like my curtains, and
Oh,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah, the-
sure.
they liked the extra things that
Yeah.
Murray did.
And you too. I think what I've always told Brandon, and obviously they broke the mold with your generation. Like your generation had to go through the depression and war, and just so you're always serving, always. Every time I would ever come over, Grandpa would say, "So what you want to eat?" He's gonna fix me a weenie.
He liked to fix French fries.
Oh, that was his
yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Yep, he did like those.